September of 1973. Wayne County, Ohio. The letter from the county engineer's office arrived on a Thursday, and Harlan Detweiler read it twice at the kitchen table before he set it down. The county was widening County Road 70, a 4-mile stretch between Mount Eaton and Shreve, as part of a rural road improvement project funded by the state. The widening required an 18-foot right-of-way strip along the north side of the road. On Harlan's property, this strip ran for 340 feet along the road frontage. The 1887 bank barn sat 22 feet from the existing road center line. After widening, it would sit 4 feet from the new road edge. The county engineer had determined it could not remain. Eminent domain proceedings would begin. An appraiser would contact him within 30 days. He was 56 years old, had farmed 240 acres in Wayne County his entire adult life, on ground his grandfather had cleared in the 1890s. The bank barn had been standing on the property since before his grandfather arrived. He walked out to the barn that evening. It was a 3-level Ohio bank barn, built into the slope of the hill so the lower cattle stable was accessible from grade on the north side, while the threshing floor and hay mow were accessible from the south, where the ground sloped up to meet the upper level. The framing was hand-hewn. The main sill beams were 10 inches by 12 inches, white oak, 40 feet long, still square and true after 86 years. The vertical posts and horizontal tie beams were white oak and American chestnut both. He'd known this since he was a boy. His grandfather had told him the barn was chestnut and oak. He ran his hand along one of the chestnut posts in the cattle stable. The wood was the color of dark honey, smooth from decades of animal contact. No checking, no rot. Chestnut didn't rot. He was already thinking about what could be done with it. The appraiser from the county came out in October. He was a man from Worcester who had done dozens of rural property appraisals for road projects in Wayne County. He walked the structure for 45 minutes. He noted the roof had 2 areas of soft decking near the north eave. One of the 3 original wooden barn doors had been replaced with a steel sliding door in 1961. The siding boards were weathered gray, checked and split on the outer face. He valued the barn at $2,800. Harlan asked if that included the value of the timber. The appraiser said it reflected the depreciated replacement value of the structure as a whole. Harlan asked what the salvage value of the framing timber would be if someone wanted to reuse it. The appraiser said he didn't assess salvage value separately. He said the structure was being condemned, not sold for parts. He left the appraisal paperwork on the kitchen table. The demolition contract went to a crew out of Worcester, 3 men and a Diesven Caterpillar, standard arrangement for rural barn demolition in Wayne County. The crew foreman was a man named Elvin Raber, who had knocked down 40-some barns in his career, mostly for road projects or after fire. He came out to the property in November to walk the structure and estimate the job. Harlan met him in the barnyard and asked what happened to the material after demolition. Raber said it all went to the landfill in Worcester. Said old barn wood was mostly rotten through or full of nails and wasn't worth the time to sort. Said the stone from the foundation would go to road fill. Harlan said he'd like to keep the material. Raber said that was fine with him. It would save a landfill trip. He said he'd need Harlan clear of the area when the D7 was working. Said the machine didn't know the difference between a man and a board. Harlan said he'd stay clear of the machine. He asked if he could bring his own crew in to disassemble the upper framing before the Caterpillar arrived. Raber said the county was paying him to demolish and clear, not to disassemble. He said if Harlan wanted to take apart the top framing, he'd need to do it on his own time before the machine showed up. He said the machine was coming March 15th. Harlan spent the winter planning. He knew the barn's framing the way he knew his own tools. Had climbed through it since childhood, repaired it, replaced 2 rafters in 1961, re-nailed the south girt in 1968. He drew the bent layout on graph paper, working from memory. 6 bents spaced at 10-foot intervals, each consisting of 2 vertical posts and a horizontal tie beam connected with mortise and tenon joints, pinned with white oak pegs. The bents were connected along their tops by plates and by the principal purlin running the length of the barn at the ridge. He listed the timber by piece. He counted 52 framing members of a 8 inches or larger, posts, tie beams, plates, and purlins. He estimated the siding boards at 8,000 board feet, mostly chestnut, with some white pine in the upper sections added during a later repair. He called the lumber yard in Worcester in January and asked the price of reclaimed chestnut planking. The man on the phone said there wasn't much reclaimed chestnut coming through anymore, and what there was sold for $4.50 per board foot when it was sound. 8,000 board feet at $4.50, $36,000. He called his neighbor Clarence Frey and asked if Clarence still had the portable sawmill he'd used to mill locust posts in 1970. Clarence said it was sitting in his back shed. He started disassembling the upper framing on February 3rd, 6 weeks before the caterpillar was due. 4 men helping: his son Dwayne, his neighbor Earl Schlabach, and 2 men from his church district who owed him labor from previous years of barn raising and fence work. Disassembling a mortise and tenon bent structure is the reverse of raising one. You drive the wooden pegs out from the backside with a steel drift pin and a maul. Each peg is tapered, driven in from one face so it backs out from the other. When the pegs are out, the joints release. The timbers are lowered by rope and block, not dropped. You lower them onto sawhorses, then to the ground, then stack them in rows by size. The first bent took 4 hours. By the 4th bent, they were doing it in 2. The chestnut posts came out of the joints as clean as the day they'd been fitted. No checking, no decay, the mortise faces still sharp. The white oak tie beams the same. The wood that had been inside the barn, protected from weather for 86 years, was as sound as new timber. The principal purlin was the problem. It was 40 feet of white oak, 8 inches by 10 inches, 200 pounds, running the full length of the barn at the ridge. Getting it down required a tractor and a block and tackle rigged from the top of the haymow, 6 men on the ropes, Harlan on the tractor throttle. It came down in 20 minutes and landed in the snow of the barnyard without breaking. He carried it to the laydown area on tractor forks and set it at the head of the timber stack. The siding boards were stripped through February, pried by hand, each board numbered in chalk on the back face with the bent number and its position in the sequence. Harlan did the numbering himself, working off the graph paper drawing. When the boards were stacked in the lean-to he'd built to keep them dry, they were organized by size and by their original position in the structure. He'd thought about that for 3 weeks over the winter. If you were going to use the same boards again, you needed to know which ones went where. By March 12th, the upper 2/3 of the framing was disassembled and stacked. The caterpillar arrived March 15th and took the lower third, the cattle stable framing and the foundation stonework, in 2 days. Raber had his crew sort the stone from the debris and stack it at the field edge. He said he'd gotten used to sorting stone when farmers wanted it. Harlan built the first structure in the summer of 1974. A machine shed, 40 feet by 60 feet, on a new concrete slab he and Dwayne poured in May. The bent layout came directly from the graph paper drawing. Same spacing, same timber dimensions, same mortise and tenon joinery. He had joints recut where the fit had loosened over the decades, using Clarence Frey's portable sawmill to dress the faces. New white oak pegs were turned by a man in his church district who made wooden tools and charged $14 for the lot. The machine shed went up in a single day with 16 men from the church district and 4 from neighboring farms. Barn raising was still common practice in Wayne County in 1974. You fed the crew a meal and they gave you the day. The roof was the only new material. 24 panels of painted metal roofing at $6.80 from the farm supply in Millersburg. Everything else was the 1887 barn. Earl Schlabach's hay barn went up the following spring. Schlabach had been renting covered storage at the elevator in Shreve because his own property didn't have enough. Harlan offered him lumber from the remaining stack, enough for a 30 by 40 hay barn, in exchange for 3 days of Schlabach's labor on other projects that summer. Schlabach's church district raised the barn in April of 1975. 31 men, half a day to frame, half a day to roof and side. Harlan attended and watched them drive the same white oak pegs into the same chestnut mortise holes that someone had cut in 1887. The lumber was 88 years old by then. It looked like new timber. Chestnut doesn't check, doesn't rot, and doesn't split along the grain the way other woods do. The men who handled it noticed. Several asked where it had come from. Schlabach told them. Harlan was standing close enough to hear. He didn't say anything about it. The third structure was a livestock barn for Duane, who was starting a sheep and beef operation on 80 rented acres 3 miles east of the home farm. He needed covered space for 30 ewes through lambing and winter shelter for 12 head of cattle. Harlan and Duane worked the third barn themselves through the fall of 1975 and spring of 1976, with Schlabach and 2 other neighbors helping with the heavy lifts. The structure was 24 by 36 feet, using the secondary timbers from the original barn. The smaller posts, shorter plates, the chestnut rafters that had been stacked separately through the winters. They finished it in May of 1976. 3 structures. Everything in the 1887 barn accounted for and in use. New materials purchased for all 3 combined. $6.80 in metal roofing for the machine shed, $420 for the hay barn, $310 for the livestock barn, $104 in concrete anchor hardware, $14 in new oak pegs, $1,164 in purchased materials, 3 structures, 6,000 square feet of covered agricultural space. The county had paid Harlan $2,800 for the condemned barn. He had spent $1,164 in new materials. He came out 1,130 cents ahead of where he'd started in September of 1973, and 3 barns better. Elvin Raber came back through Wayne County on another demolition job in 1976 and drove past the Schlabach property. He saw the hay barn. He recognized the chestnut siding boards. He'd seen enough old barn wood to know chestnut by its color and grain. He stopped and asked Schlabach where the lumber had come from. Schlabach told him. Raber said he'd seen a lot of barns go to the landfill that shouldn't have. He didn't say anything further. Harlan Detweiler farmed 240 acres in Wayne County until 1994. He was 77 years old when he passed the farm to Duane. The machine shed built from the 1887 barn's framing was 20 years old by then and showed no signs of structural movement. The chestnut posts were the same color they'd been the day they came out of the original bents. Dark honey, smooth, harder than the oak around them. The 40-foot white oak purlin that had taken 6 men and a tractor to lower out of the ridge in February of 1974 was the ridge beam of the machine shed. It ran the full length of the structure, visible from the interior when you stood at the south end and looked up. Duane Detweiler still farms the same ground. The machine shed stands. The chestnut posts don't need painting, don't need treating, don't need anything. The American chestnut was functionally eliminated by a fungal blight that arrived from Asia around 1904 and killed nearly every mature chestnut tree in North America by 1940. No new chestnut lumber has been harvested from living trees in meaningful quantity since then. What exists in pre-blight structures, old barns, old houses, old covered bridges, is what exists. There is no more coming. The 1887 Wayne County Bank Barns chestnut framing is in 3 structures. It has been framing covered agricultural space in Ohio since 1887. It will continue as long as the structures stand, because chestnut doesn't rot, and the wood that doesn't rot doesn't need replacing. The county engineer who ordered the demolition needed 18 feet of right-of-way. He got it. He also sent approximately $36,000 worth of irreplaceable timber to a man who knew what it was, for the price of letting him keep it. That was the best trade Harlan Detweiler ever made. He hadn't asked for it. The county sent it to his door.